Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. So glad that you're joining us today. We're going to be talking in today's program about a really important subject. We're going to be talking about education in America. And we're going to be talking about a specific context and a specific issue today that's arisen in a local school district here in the state of Colorado. The Elizabeth School District has found itself as the subject of a lawsuit filed by none other than the ACLU. You see, the Elizabeth School District, a rural district here on the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, decided that there were a few books in its school library that didn't belong there because the material was so lacking in educational value, so inconsistent with the curriculum that was being taught in the schools, and the material was so indecent and obscene that it shouldn't be allowed on the library shelves of this small school district. Well, the ACLU came in and said, you can't do that. You have no power to dictate ideas to the people in your district. You have to allow this obscene material to stay on these shelves because really you're just discriminating against people anyway. So Elizabeth School District Superintendent and their public information officer, the Superintendent Dan Snowberger, and the PIO Jeff Maher are going to be joining me in just a little bit. But let's talk about schools for a second. You know, schools, public schools, or schools of any kind, are one of the most powerful organizations and institutions that exist for the transmission of ideas, whether those ideas be true or whether they be false, whether they be good, whether they be evil, virtuous or empty. And the medium of education is something that ought to concern every Christian, every person who cares about the future of our country. Their effect on children who eventually become citizens, who eventually become parents, lasts a lifetime and is transmitted not just to them, but to others. Abraham Lincoln said this. He said, the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. And boy, isn't that true? What are we experiencing in America today? With wild, crazy ideas dominated by the leftists in our government, everything from open borders to, flying the LGBT flag from our embassies, and taxing the rich, and all this other stuff, this Marxist socialist stuff that is ruining our nation, that is undermining our country. All of this, these people primarily acquired it in the course of their education in our public school system. So the question that's facing the court in the Elizabeth School District case is whether school districts have the power to decide what goes into the curriculum. Does a school district get to decide what they teach? Or do outside groups like the ACLU, do empty-headed liberal progressives get to dictate what goes into the curriculum? Or can the people that we trust with the education of our children get to decide? And can they restrict the content of our educational material to what is age appropriate and to what advances the educational objectives of the school district? Well, I'd say to you, not only can they must. They have to. There's no practical alternative, for one thing. How can you run a school system if you can't decide what the kids are being taught, what the curriculum is? And that includes not just the textbooks and the workbooks, it includes the library. These decisions, these issues are unavoidable for educators. And I would submit even further that not only do they have an obligation to make those decisions, but they have a responsibility to limit the material that is being taught to our children to material that is constructive, that will create or provide the children with a well-rounded education, but that will also contribute to them becoming responsible adults and citizens of our community. And you know, folks, when it comes to the subject of sex, it seems like everything in our culture today revolves around sex. We've got LGBT issues. We've got abortion. We've got, gay marriage. We've got all of these things that are revolving around sex. And you have to ask ourselves, why is this? It's really simple. It's because with the subject of sex, as God made us, there is a power there to destroy humanity. And this is what the enemy of our souls wants to do. He wants us to abandon God's standards, God's directions, even common sense in this vital area, and embrace this false notion that there are no standards, that there is no truth, and that we can do as human beings whatever we want, whatever lust drives us to do. And because he knows that if we'll embrace that way of thinking, that eventually we'll be destroyed. Our families will be destroyed. Our bodies will be destroyed. We won't even reproduce anymore. That eventually we'll become like animals. It's like when we discuss these subjects, though, that there's an invisible barrier almost, an initial hurdle that almost can't even be discussed that we have to get over, and it's this. The left has instilled in the American and in the Western mind this idea that you can't have standards when it comes to of morality when it comes to sex. That is a taboo thing. You can't talk about it. It's okay for an individual to have standards, but you can't talk about it in public. Under no circumstances is anyone ever allowed to advocate that there are objective standards of right and wrong when it comes to sex and that we ought to adopt these as a society. No, God forbid, this is off limits. This is taboo. Why is that? You have to wonder. It's like when you begin to discuss this in public, it's as if you're guilty of being some kind of bigot, some close-minded tyrant who wants to control other people and dictate what they can and cannot think and believe. But that's an untenable position for us as a culture and as a society. If that's what we're going to say, that there are no standards that can be agreed on when it comes to sexual activity, we're not going to last very long. In fact, we are deteriorating every day because of this. Now, I believe that America is actually experiencing a revival right now. But up until recently, America was on a fast train to destruction because we've embraced this unbiblical, ungodly thought process that we can't have public standards when it comes to sex. These standards that have been embraced by our country of marriage is old-fashioned. You can live with and have sex with whoever you want. Live with them outside of marriage. It doesn't matter. That abortion is a matter of fundamental human rights. So that means you can have sex, get pregnant, kill the baby, and move on, no problem. Right? That it's not just opposite sex now. You can have same sex, and even same-sex people can get married now, and they can go in a laboratory and create children that they can try to raise as a same-sex couple, and on it goes. Even on the left now, they're teaching that prostitution, or what they call sex work, is somehow a legitimate profession, a good, constructive profession that should be fully legal and embraced and protected. That sex at any age is okay. After all, teens, they'll have sex, and that what is an acceptable age just gets lower and lower and lower. Now we have adults saying that they have a right to have sex with children and other things like this. We're reaching a point of depravity in our minds as a culture that we cannot come back from if we don't stop now. So in our public schools, we can't afford this discussion to go on any longer without us, the church, Christians, stepping into the fray and beginning to say, with truth and conviction, all love and charity, but with truth and conviction that there are standards and that we need to embrace God's standards. We need to instill these standards in our children. By dropping all standards, we're encouraging the people that have no standards. There is no such thing as neutral ground here. Children, the Bible is clear that a child left to his own devices is going to reap destruction. If we spare the rod, as the saying goes, we spoil the child. We see the spread of STD, sexually transmitted diseases. We have incredible rates of abortion. We have emotional trauma and mental trauma that teenagers and young adults are suffering from now. A lack of connectedness, not more connectedness because of free sex, actually a feeling of abandonment. The sense among young people today that they have no purpose, they have no identity, that their value comes from the degree to which they're desired sexually, right? Treating sex as nothing more than a medium for physical pleasure. What does that do to our kids? What does it do to human beings? I'll tell you what it does. It reduces us to nothing more than the act, nothing more than the pleasure that comes from the act, supposedly. And it causes people to have to seek higher and greater amounts of pleasure, more and more deviant, more and more extreme behavior to satisfy that, because really it's not just the physical that they're satisfying, it's the internal need for significance. And if sex is not guarded and not protected, if it's not sheltered by the idea that human beings are more than animals, that we are made in the image of God, we are children of God, and this act is reserved for a husband and a wife in the context of a lifelong covenant where the bedrock of that covenant is unconditional love and acceptance for one another, that safe environment, then we just get degraded into animals, and it's destructive to us as human beings. Guys, the idea, the unspoken idea that we can compartmentalize sex and put it over here on a shelf and there aren't any standards there, there's no morals there, it's a lie. You cannot compartmentalize this. As a culture, I'm saying even. If we don't, because what the left wants is they want sex without values. And what I'm saying to you today is if we don't value human beings for one purpose, we won't value them for other purposes. We can't say you're devalued over here for one of the most important things in human existence, in human life, which is the marriage relationship. You're not valued over here, but you're going to be valued over here. Well, that's a lie. It's a satanic lie. If I can use people for my own physical gratification in one area, why can't I use them for my gratification in other areas? If I can use them to gratify me for sex, why can't I use them to advance me for financial reasons? Why can't I abuse them and use them for more power or for whatever my momentary desire might be? You see, it doesn't work that way. We don't live on intellectual and emotional islands. Everything is connected. And over the last few years, it's come to light that the LGBT movement has infiltrated our education system to a degree and at levels that we could never have imagined. They're teaching homosexuality as valid. They're teaching transgenderism as truth. They're teaching that parents aren't the ones who have a primary responsibility for their children. They're teaching that parents can't be trusted, right? And we have books in the libraries of our schools all across this country and the public libraries throughout this country that are available to young children that are sexually explicit, sexually graphic. Not only that, they advocate for or foster not just sexual immorality, promiscuity, and all kinds of stuff in that arena, but also profanity, drug use, alcohol abuse, disrespect for authority, rejection of traditional values and American values. What is the purpose of education anyway? Is it just transmitting information? It can't be. You can't divorce the teaching of facts, of history, from the teaching of values context for these things, right? Even science itself has values built into the teaching of it. We have to do this. And so we can't buy into the lie that education ought to be neutral. It can't be neutral. And as a result of this, we as Christians, we need to stand up, we need to get involved, we need to voice God's standards that apply to these things. The reality of God's Word, what God says is true, must be applied to this debate. And we have to get involved and we have to fight for our children. And here to talk with us more about this subject is Dan Snowberger, the superintendent of Elizabeth School District here in Colorado. Dan has more than 37 years of experience in public education, including 28 years of improving systems to increase and sustain student achievement and performance. He served in public schools and private school sectors both in California, Colorado, and Florida. From 2012 to 2021, he was the superintendent of Durango Public Schools here in Colorado, and he's held many, many other positions. We also have Jeff Maher, who's with us. And Jeff, Maher. Jeff is the public information officer for Elizabeth Public Schools. He joined them in July of 2024. He's a communications manager for STEM High School of Highlands Ranch. He's been granted awards throughout the media, including the Associated Press, the New Mexico Broadcasters Association, the Society of Professional Journalists, and many other accolades. So we're really thankful to have both Dan and Jeff with us as guests today on Truth and Liberty. We're going to be talking about their battle to get obscene material out of the school library and what that means not only for that subject, but also the broader context of education in America. So don't go away. You won't want to miss this interview. We're going to share some brief information with you, and we'll be right back. So we'll see you in just a few seconds. Are you passionate about standing for truth in the culture, but don't know how to get started? Well, Truth and Liberty, our mission is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. And as part of our mission, we provide you with an amazing array of resources on our website. And our website has just been revamped, remodeled, and retooled to be user-friendly. And I'm so excited about it because I believe that there's nothing like it out there anywhere. I want to encourage you today to go to truthandliberty.net and check out the Resources Center and the Get Equipped Center. On our Resources Center, you will find hundreds of links, hundreds of videos, articles, blogs, even America's original founding documents can be found on Truth and Liberty's Resources Center. It's searchable by topic, preset topic, or you can put in a custom search to find exactly what you need and what you're interested in. In the Get Equipped section, we link you to tools created by our strategic partners, including Pray, Vote, and Engage tools. We culture impact teams, civic action teams, biblical citizenship in modern America, biblical worldview training, and more. So go today to truthandliberty.net and find what you need to get equipped to stand for truth in the public square. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Truth and Liberty. I'm really excited today to have as our guests with us Dan Snowberger and Jeff Maher. Dan, as I said in my monologue, is the superintendent of Elizabeth Public Schools here in Colorado. Dan, you're the public information officer for the school district. And we're here today to talk about what you're going through right now in real time with the struggle to maintain standards of decency and relevance really for education in the books and other things that are in the library of your school district. So Dan, can you just start us off today by just telling us, how did you get here? What happened? How did you find yourself in the middle of a lawsuit against the ACLU?
Yeah, not something we ever dream of, right? But it's unfortunately has happened. So, our district, Elizabeth School District, is an amazing community and very engaged community. Since myself and our current board have been in the district, we've really focused around parental rights. One of the concerns that surfaced early on in my tenure was parents who were concerned about some of the books they were bringing home from the library. And so our board, in engaging our community, formed a curriculum review committee. That committee began reviewing our library collection and came across some books that were concerning. Instead of just quietly disposing of them, as probably many school districts may, we felt like it was important for the community to weigh in. And so the community had almost a month to come in, review the books, give the board feedback. Overwhelmingly, our community on these 19 books in particular that are in question through this lawsuit said these don't belong, they have no educational value, they're inappropriate for the age group where they appeared, and encouraged the board to remove them, which the board did. 4 months later, that was September of 2024, and in December of 2024, we received notice that we were being sued by a lawsuit supported by the ACLU, demanding that those books be returned and that the district cease any further review of their library books. We were just beginning the process, so these 19 books are the start of I'm sure there's a few others that we would like our community to review. Unfortunately, we're under court order right now to cease.
Well, so can you give us a taste, an understanding of what the problem was with these 19 books?
Sure. These particular books had a variety of categories. A number of them had very graphic sexual content. In some cases, graphic sexual content that was inappropriate for high schools, and in some cases in middle school. So we had a couple of books that were removed from our middle school that the content was inappropriate at that age group. One of the books we removed actually is still at the high school because it was age appropriate for the high school, but not for a sixth grader who might be 12 starting to read at the middle school. So there was sexual content. There was ideations of self-harm, books about suicide and giving some pretty clear descriptions of how to commit suicide. Books about school shootings, very graphic recounts of school shootings, which unfortunately plant seeds for students that are not necessary. There's books that just had some pretty strong language and inappropriate content that again, at the age group, elementary book, that went into some content that, again, you would not want a kindergartner, a 5-year-old, to pull off the shelf and have read to them or read themselves. So those books contain a variety of different contents that just were concerning overall to our community. And again, that was our first set. There was a second set that we were about to bring to the table, and those have been on hold right now because of this process.
Yeah, it's funny, around the country we've seen some news reports on these fights that are going on in school districts across America, and sometimes parents will come in and they'll read an excerpt from the book, and the great irony of it is the board will shut down the parent and say that's not appropriate for a public meeting, right? To read that content. And so you ask the question, well, if it's not appropriate for this room full of adults, how could it be okay for our kids?
And Richard, to that point, our board actually read. We had 3 board meetings from the beginning of this process till the end. And our board actually read some content out loud for parents who weren't able to get in, just to make sure that parents understood this was not, minor content. This was serious content. And so the board did give a warning. If you are watching from home, this was being streamed, please turn it off. It's inappropriate for children. And we did have a couple of members in the audience who were opposed to the removal who got up and left. And so it was almost the opposite in our situation, where the board read excerpts from the book, and members in the audience, a handful of people who felt like the book should remain, actually were uncomfortable and left.
And so how did the public review process go on this? Did you put them all out on a table and say, come check them out?
We had them out in the boardroom. We had multiple nights, knowing that not all parents can come during the day, so they were available during business hours as well as multiple evenings. We did flag some of the key passages, some of the key pages, just knowing that parents didn't have time to come and read a 600-page novel. So we tried to flag, and some of those books were rather rainbow colored because of the number of flags that were in them, but really wanting to draw attention to this as a content, this is a concern. We used a variety of websites to identify content that was a concern in other communities. So we tried to help our community get to, is this an issue or not? And so that was available, and they had a chance to give written feedback. They had a chance to email the board. They had a chance to speak at board meetings, and many took advantage of all 3 of those.
So Dan, did you guys find that the public was pretty appalled by what they found?
Very much so. Very much so. This community in Elizabeth has been firmly behind this board and the efforts of the district. And again, this is one of many efforts we have underway to restore parental rights, to ensure that parents are raising their children, and that our job is to support them, not to direct them.
Yeah, I want to talk about parental rights some, but let me get to the exhaust this subject first. But as you're going through this process, Jeff, did you guys encounter opposition at the local level? Did the news media come out against you? What was that all like?
From the onset of this case and getting media attention from the beginning following the lawsuit, we received quite a bit of inquiries from local media, which we responded to. We gave numerous statements, and Dan and myself would give interviews at length with some of these individuals, only to find that when the article would come out or the story would come out, that they would only use just a small quote or small snippet of the hour-long interview that we gave, and then the rest of the article was filled with content to support their narrative, to ignite their base, to make us look like we were discriminatory against certain groups, which is absolutely not the case. As Dan pointed out, we have a diverse group of authors and books in our libraries. It's not targeted to certain authors or groups at all. It has to do with the content in these books that have been reviewed, and as we pointed out, overwhelming majority of our community supported the removal of these books. And so it really comes down to having to get our message across using our YouTube channel, using our social media, interviews that I do with Dan about the issue, and getting a message out that way, because we really, for the most part, don't get a fair shot in the local media.
Right. Well, so one more question on this. Before the vote or this analysis or review was taken, Dan, did the district have a set of standards or a policy that had been adopted on what's acceptable and not acceptable?
Yeah. Our libraries in our board policy are an extension of our curriculum, and so that was one of the questions we asked: is there any curricular content of this material, parents, to the curriculum that you expect your children to read? So we believe very strongly that our libraries are not public libraries, are not meant to have every piece of literature within it. It's truly designed to have a collection of materials that support the content that's in our curriculum. And our curriculum is very focused around ensuring the children learn to read, write, do math, learn real science, learn our history, the real history, and learn civics, learn how our government's supposed to function. So things outside of that content really, in our belief, don't belong in our libraries.
Well, what's the other side of this? What does the ACLU say? That you should allow anything and everything into your libraries, no matter what it is talking about?
To some degree, the argument is once it's there, you can't remove it. It's First Amendment issue if you do, that you're removing the author's right to have his content or her content delivered to the audience. That's one of their arguments, is a First Amendment right.
Isn't it ironic, guys, that we live in a time where we call it cancel culture, right? Where it seems like predominantly on one side of the debate that anytime anyone disagrees or holds a view they don't like, then they cancel. You can't go on, your show gets dropped, or you boycott their product, or whatever the case may be. And yet, in this situation, they say, well, once it's there, you can never remove it. It seems hypocritical to me. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely hypocritical. And I think that the reality is we don't have enough room. Libraries are curated every year. That you have to remove books before you add books, and there's constantly new material that supports the curriculum. So you can't just continue to add. You have to have some way of saying these books no longer belong. Many of these books have never been checked out, Richard. That's part of the interesting challenge. Is more than half of them have never been checked out. In some cases, 20 years they've been sitting on the shelf in our library. Wow. So through the typical weeding process that occurs in every library, where you're trying to say, okay, what books are not popular, what books aren't being used, what can I create room for new books that are of interest. Now we're under court order that says only the local judge here in Denver, has the right to make that decision. So to some degree, the board has lost their local control, which is in our Constitution in Colorado.
And so the district has a policy on what is permitted and not permitted. When they're reviewing the books, does the board, is this a board decision, or is it committee?
It's a board decision.
Okay.
So the Curriculum Review Committee made the recommendation to the board that they review these books. The board turned to the community and said, help us.
Does the policy have any requirements in it for standards of decency or
age
appropriateness?
Absolutely.
Or what?
Absolutely. It does require that it be age appropriate, that it has a direct connection to the curriculum, that it is an extension of the curricular resources in the district. And so that's the policy that exists. Moving forward, this board has put into place that all new materials will be reviewed by our chief academic officer to ensure that they do in fact align. So there is a review process moving forward. What the board's trying to rectify is 25 years of different leadership where people made decisions. We don't have licensed librarians in our district. We have parents who have volunteered to be the librarian, and many of these book companies have packaged for $2,000. Here's 100 books ready to shelve. And that's where many of these books came from, is these mass purchases from book companies, and And so no one said, gosh, I want that book. It just happened to, again, arrive on the library shelf. And now we have a process to review. That's what's led to this challenge.
Well, so in this lawsuit that you're involved in now, I understood, I read some of your briefs and stuff, and I saw a contention in there that you guys, as a party to the case, you tried to transmit information via the federal email system necessary for filing your briefs in the court, and the system, the filter rejected the filing because of the indecent content.
Yeah, and the Child Internet Protection Act, which is a federal law that school districts must follow if they're to access federal funds, says you must have a internet filter in place to prevent obscene content from reaching students. As our briefs were being prepared, and you've read some of them, we did quote some of the books because we felt like this judge needs to hear what really is in these books versus what the argument of the plaintiffs are. And those could not be transmitted through the district email system because of that child internet protection filter. So, so that is a little interesting.
If you lose this case, it means that the federal courts will prevent litigants from transmitting information over their email system, but because of indecency, but that same stuff is suitable for our children to read in our school libraries.
That would be the outcome if that's the decision. We certainly don't expect that.
I don't expect it either, but but you lost at the district level, right?
We lost at the district level on our preliminary injunction. So the preliminary injunction right now is before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. They have taken the case to hear our arguments as to why the preliminary injunction is inappropriate. They refused the administrative stay, which was disappointing. Those books did have to be returned to our libraries on May 6th. Our libraries actually closed 2 days later because of the end of the year and processing materials. So the books are back on our shelves and didn't have much access to children this year. But we currently are waiting 10th Circuit Court scheduling, which we anticipate potentially to be in September. Unfortunately, school will have been in session two months. We do have a system in our district where we can flag books that have sensitive content. There are a lot of historical books that have content that a parent may prefer to read with their child than have their child read alone. And so we have a system. So all of those books that have been returned to the library are now flagged as sensitive content. So parents have the ability now to opt them out of checking out sensitive content. So we do still have a way of empowering parents until this case is played out in court.
So make sure everybody understands this. You have in place a system to protect kids by labeling something as sensitive content that that the parent has to approve for them to get to check that book out. But these 19 books we're talking about, they didn't even make it on the sensitive content
they
list.
were
They're
so over the top. They were
Yeah.
so over top, again, based on the level. So again, we had an elementary book, we had multiple middle school books, and we had high school books. So based on the level where they appeared, they were so far excessive of even being appropriate. Books on the sensitive content list may have religious content. The Book of Quran happens to be in our library. There are parents who would rather their child not read the Book of Quran. They can opt out of that. The Book of Mormon is in our library. There may be a parent that says, I don't want my child to check out a religious book contrary to my beliefs. That's a parent's right, in our opinion. There are books with excessive racism that really expose children to things that, again, without that adult conversation, might cause a child to interpret differently. And so the sensitive topic list is really designed to capture those topics that we've heard from parents. We want to make sure that if our child checks out a book with that content that we know and that we can guide them through understanding. There are some historical books that have some pretty gory content because that's history. That doesn't mean that book should be removed from the library shelf. It just means we should empower that parent to say, when my child reads that book, I want to know, or I want to give permission, and I want to be able to guide them through it. There's parents who again, aren't opposed to their children learning real history, but wanting them to learn it. And there are books we read in the classroom. You have a teacher guiding, helping to explain why events happened the way that they did, historical events. Exposing children that way to content versus I'm picking up and all I'm doing is focusing on the act that's being described versus understanding the historical nature of why was that regime one of our books highlighted Afghanistan and the true horrors of Afghanistan. The sodomy and the graphic descriptions in that particular book rose to the level of, we probably shouldn't offer that. Parents who want their children to read it certainly can get it from the public library. They can order it through Amazon. They can have it delivered to their door. But it's not a book we felt like, because of the graphic nature, even though it was historical in nature, it wasn't a book that we felt like should just be taken off the shelf and read by a student in school. So, so again, it's a tightrope. It's walking through books that definitely have very historical, or have historical value and that are accurate. But again, empowering parents to say, I want to know when my child. So as a parent, if you don't opt your child out, you still get an email when they check out a book that has sensitive content. So you have that alert of, my child has checked out a book. I may want to look at that book with my child. I may want to check. And we have a lot of parents who are engaged with their children to that degree. And so that system really allows a parent to make the choice. I don't want my children accessing graphic content, or I just want to know when they do. So it provides a variety of options.
And the collection of books that we are talking about are explicit in nature. And one of the things that Dan and I have done in recent months is we've gone on the radio in Colorado, and also on some television programs, where we've read what we can from these books, but there's plenty of excerpts that we would not be able to read, otherwise it would be an FCC violation. So that just goes along with what you were saying about our internet filter and just the obvious nature of the graphic content in these books, and how it just cannot be transmitted, yet some believe that it should be on the shelves for kids to grab, and it just doesn't make sense to us.
No, it doesn't. So if I understand the ACLU's position here, they're saying, and I think I saw a quote of their attorney to some news outlet, was that we don't think government should be in the business of telling people what ideas are acceptable and what are not acceptable. Is that what Elizabeth Schools is doing, is telling people what ideas are acceptable and not?
No, I think we're empowering parents. We're empowering parents to raise their children. I think public schools have taken far too much authority away from the role of being a parent. And so our role is to support parents. There is a concept of government speak, though, and that's really at the root of our argument. Is governments select what statues will be in their museums, what content will be presented in their publications. Government makes decisions like that. School districts make decisions like that. Again, we haven't banned these books, meaning if a child were to bring one of these books for quiet reading time, open it up and read it personally to themselves, they're not in trouble. It's not a book we feel like we as a school district should provide. That's a parent choice. And so, we've been accused of being book banners. Well, those books are not denied from coming into our school. We're just not providing it because it's inappropriate.
Well, and isn't that a decision that has to be made for all curriculum?
Correct.
All the time?
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no obligation to say, okay, there's 25 different social studies curriculums available for us to purchase, and somehow we got to make them all available.
Exactly.
That's crazy, right?
Simultaneously, our curriculum review committee was selecting a new science curriculum for our kindergarten through 8th grade students. So they were doing the library review and selecting a science curriculum. They chose a science curriculum that aligned with, again, the interests of the community members who, in my opinion, own the school district. They're the taxpayers, and so that very same thing happened with science curriculums. We didn't have to take every science curriculum. They chose a curriculum that best aligned with the values of our community, that taught the key contents that our community felt like were most important.
Well, let's talk about this question. So again, a little bit philosophical here, Dan, but the idea of what role do values play in education? I'd submit, and I want your feedback on this, that it's not really possible to have education without transmitting values.
Correct.
That pretty much everything, I mean, if you're teaching 1 + 1, that's fine, or the earth is so many miles from the sun, that's fine. But for the vast majority of subjects and things, what and how you teach is going to be, there's going to be values instilled in that process. Am I right on that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Common values of civility, common values of respect, responsibility, persistence, perseverance. I mean, those are values that we instill in our children, and we believe those are values that are aligned with the traditional American values that we hold dear in Elizabeth. And so, so again, you can't have an educational setting devoid of values, but you can have an educational setting that prevents forcing values on somebody who may have a family who has strong values and works as a family to instill those values. And we say often in our district, our job is not to change values. Our job is to have children come to school, learn to read, write, do math, be successful as citizens when they leave our school district, and go home with those values. They shouldn't know what their teacher believes politically. They shouldn't know what their teacher believes philosophically. That doesn't matter. Our job is to instruct. It's the family's job to instill values. And yes, there are children who sometimes are devoid of values, and that's where basic respect, responsibility, those values are instilled at school. But they're not contrary to I believe, what a majority believe.
Well, so gentlemen, it seems like when it comes to the subject of sex, that the left, the ACLU and organizations like that, they want all values to be removed from the discussion.
Agreed.
Something about that subject, they act like it's inherently secularized, neutralized, valueless, that people ought to be able to do anything they choose, and it's no one else's business. But in this situation, we're talking about children, aren't we?
Correct.
We're talking about innocent young minds and the information that is instilled in those minds. Do you feel like that as educators, you have a responsibility to protect children from harmful information?
Absolutely. And we believe that's why there's a Child Internet Protection Act, that we believe that we're in line with that philosophy of it is our job to ensure that, again, that children are protected from inappropriate content, obscene content. In the Colorado law, it states obscene. That is a word in Colorado statute when you talk about curriculum resources. And so, again, defining that is, I guess, where people can argue. I don't think many can argue far off of that.
And I think it really comes down to common sense. When I went to school, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media. We really relied on our teachers and our principals to give us the leadership that made us who we are today, and then the values that our parents and our families provided to us at home. There weren't really any outside forces trying to make their way in at that time. Now we do have that. And one of the weaker arguments that I hear in passing from people who want to just abandon any sense of moral compass is that the children will find out about this anyway.
Yeah, that's always their fallback.
And I think that that's such a weak argument, because you're basically saying that there is no line anymore, and that under the argument of First Amendment and the right to free speech, that anything and everything should be given to some of our most vulnerable minds when they can make a decision that they can't turn back from. And if they make that decision from a seed that's been planted, who's going to raise their hand and say, that's on us, we planted that seed? You won't get that, but they're being so loud about it now.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that, Jeff. It used to be, we need to hand out condoms in school, right? Because they're having sex anyway, right? So we might as well protect them. Totally ignoring the fact that, okay, so you're encouraging the harmful behavior as if you have no ability to influence them, with standards, teaching standards and consequences and things like that. So you're right. It's a very weak argument, I think. But public education in America, of course, years ago when America was founded and so on, the modern public education system didn't exist, and most schools were affiliated with churches. Most children were in their younger years were educated at home. But in today's world, 88% or so, I think, of American students are in public school systems. And in a sense, the public education system is being entrusted with these children, standing almost in the place of parents. And so do you feel that there's an obligation to protect kids, just like a parent? If a parent were to sit down and read one of those 19 books to a young child, one might have an argument that that was abusive behavior. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So, but yet we want a school to do it
correct
without any standards or repercussions at all. Do you see that as inconsistent?
Absolutely. And I think that's a challenge in public education. It's why 40% of children can read, is because we as school districts, or as public school districts, have taken on more and more responsibilities that aren't ours. Our job is to educate children. It's to ensure that they can read, write, do math. Again, learn real science, learn our true history, and learn how our government's supposed to function. That's our role.
Yeah.
If we were doing a better job, we'd have more than 40% of our children in the nation reading. And so I think that's our position as Elizabeth School District, is we've got to get back to educating children and letting parents take on that role of raising their children. When you think about, I mean, this is my 39th year in public education, Richard, and the things that I've seen during my career, it's concerning to me. I think we're at a critical crossroads where public education may cease, because more and more parents, I think COVID opened the doors for many parents to say, this is what's going on in our schools. Right. I think we're seeing more and more parents turn to other choices. And frankly, we as public education systems can either get back into our traditional position, which is to educate children to be successful citizens when they leave our school districts, or we're going to see less and less children. And I think that's what's happening across the country, is more and more families are saying, not for me. Yeah. And that's sad. That's sad, because I believe that a school district can fulfill their responsibility if we stay in that lane, if we make sure that's our role. And then we partner with parents. Raising children today, they don't come with manuals, and we can work together. But the bottom line is, it is not our job. It is a parent's job, and it's our job to come alongside them, like happened with my parents when I was growing up. You know, schools didn't inflict values on me. My values came from home. Schools communicated with my parents, and my parents enforced those values. And truly, I think that's where we have to get back if we're going to be successful.
Yeah. Well, let's go 30,000 foot here and talk about what has happened to America's education system. How did we find ourselves in this place? I think it was last year, it may have been the year before, but there was actually a resolution introduced at the Colorado Educators Association, the teachers union, calling for the abolition of capitalism and embracing basically communist Marxism in America. And I think it passed. How could it be that our teachers are now mostly communists? What happened?
I would say the teachers you're hearing about are mostly communist. I truly, as we changed our policies in Elizabeth to say children shouldn't know your personal beliefs, they shouldn't know your political viewpoints, that's not our job. Our teachers embraced that. Our teachers said, thank you. I want my child to wonder. I never knew who my teachers voted for or what church they went to. That wasn't my business. That wasn't their business to share with me. Today, it's if you look at the Colorado Association of School Boards controversial issues policy, it permits the sharing of your personal point of view if you share the other side. Well, the minute a child hears their teacher say, this is what I believe, the power that a traditional teacher has over a child is, how can I not believe that as their student? Oh my gosh, I respect Mr. Smith. I'm going to want to believe that because he believes that. When you think about where our policies have gone, our traditional policies that school districts are encouraged to adopt, so many of those have taken us away from where public education was 10, 20 years ago.
And I just recorded a show with Aaron Lee, who leads Protect Kids Colorado, and we were talking about the question of secret grooming of kids for transgenderism. And this is not just Colorado, it's all over the country, but what about that schools across Colorado, across America, are hiding things from parents, affirmatively stepping in and saying, this, you're not allowed into this with your own child. How can that be right?
That's concerning, and I think you're seeing parents strike back. I know there's some local lawsuits here in Colorado from families who have said, "You did not disclose this to me," and so I think it's individuals standing up and saying, "No more. This is not okay." The law in Colorado, there's many laws that say you do not need to inform parents. The laws do not say you can't. And so our district has taken the position of, we're going to inform parents. There's nothing in the law that says you can't inform them. The law says you can choose not to.
Yeah.
And that's where poor decisions are being made. And I think people see those laws and think, oh, I can't tell you. No, you can. There's nothing in that law that prevents you from doing so.
And there's an estimated 4 million families that are homeschooling their kids across the country today. As we've pointed out, that a good amount of those families are doing that because they feel like they've lost control over what is happening inside the classroom and inside the libraries. And Elizabeth School District and our 2,600 plus students and their families, we value each one, and we want to make sure that when parents send their kids off to one of our schools, that they know that none of what you had mentioned is going to infiltrate their child or their child's experience in the classroom.
Yeah.
If these are things that they want to talk about at home, that goes along with the family values that we've talked about.
Yeah, excellent. Well, and so, yeah, there's a drastic rise in homeschooling. Parents are looking for other options. Do you believe that we need more choices and options in education?
Absolutely. I believe choice, and the choice makes every option stronger. In my last district, we had some schools that were on turnaround. When we embraced choices, when we embraced charters, when we provided transportation for families to get to any school of their choosing, every school improved. Competition does work.
Yeah.
As a district, we have homeschool programs that children, just because they choose not to come to our traditional schools, should not be ignored. It is still our job to support families in whatever way we can. And so we have homeschool programs for children to come together for enrichment a day or two a week. We sought to have an online program because we felt like there are families who prefer that. That way they have greater control and involvement in the child's curriculum. As a district, we believe choice is important. And I think your strongest districts across the nation embrace choice and recognize that choice is important. If the school your child needs is across town, I'm going to get your child there. I'm not going to leave it to you.
Yeah.
Sadly, so many of our districts won't provide transportation for their charter schools, and then you're left only to affluent parents who can get their child there and get them home.
Yeah.
If you're a mom working 2 jobs, taking that on is not a choice for you.
Yeah.
In my last 2 districts now, we provide transportation for children to whatever school they want to go to, including charter schools. Because I believe it's our job to facilitate that partnership with the parent to get them the education they deserve.
Well, let's circle back to your lawsuit that you're involved in as you're trying to defend your decision and the process that you went through and everything like that. You got sued in the United States District Court for Colorado, and the district judge, I understand, on the motion for an injunction, that's where the ACLU says, Judge, order the district to put those books back. The judge did not even allow you a hearing.
Correct. There was no hearing granted, and we asked twice. We did get a stay from the judge, and after she first ordered, we did point out our arguments that we wanted to be able to argue in a hearing. The judge did give a temporary stay on her order. A couple of weeks later, reinstituted her preliminary injunction without a hearing. And that's the most fundamental, basic right, in my opinion, is a right to defend yourself. And we've not been provided that other than in written briefs. And you've got school board members who made decisions. They've presented affidavits as to their reasoning and their justification and why they made the decision that they have, and they've been ignored. Where mostly there is a single email where there was a conversation about whether a book really belonged back in the library or whether we should move it. That one email is what that judge is choosing to refer to repeatedly as our board is being ideological. So you have 5 board members who submitted written affidavit saying this is the reason I've made the decision. I was part of that decision-making process, and it's been ignored. And so
those affidavits were not presented.
They were presented to the judge, but in her ruling, not one was referenced. It was
Yeah.
actually told, because of that one email, I don't believe anything else that I hear. And so it is frustrating. And again, our complaint is moving forward. We have a status hearing in the coming week where we'll determine, we may very well move forward in the district court on the actual complaint against the district while the 10th Circuit is determining.
You've got a lot of students in your district, but by relative standards, it's a relatively small district, and these lawsuits can get incredibly expensive.
Right.
Are you having to pay for attorney's fees out of the public coffers on this, or how are you handling
We've
that?
been fortunate in that we've had a tremendous outpouring, and granted, not enough yet. We still have a long road to travel on this particular case, but I'll let Jeff share a little about some of our fundraising efforts.
So we have an ongoing fundraising effort. A lot of it is done at the grassroots level, and we are seeing a really positive community outpouring of support, both with messages and people asking me, how can I donate?
Yeah.
And so we are prepared for a long fight with this case. It is going to be costly. This is a small school district with just over 2,600 students and 5 schools. It really is a David versus Goliath fight. And so we have links on our website, elizabethschooldistrict.org, where people can go. Under the About Us section, you'll see a category specific to this case, and you'll see exactly how you can donate. And we really appreciate every dollar that comes in, because if this does end up a case that goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, it's going to be very costly. It already has been.
So once again, it's elizabethschooldistrict.org.
Right.
And then go to About Us.
Yep.
And they can find the links there. And I've been on the site, and there's also copies of the briefs and some of the filings and stuff like that in this case. So if you want to learn more about it, you can. And one more comment I'll make is many school districts, when faced with legal challenges like this, will roll over and do what the ACLU wants, because they don't want to use money that would otherwise go towards facilities and education and salaries and things like that on a lawsuit. And you guys are taking a stand, and I think that you ought to be congratulated on that. And hopefully folks will watch this and jump on your website and help you out with some of those legal costs.
I would agree, and that is their strategy, is pick on the small districts and hope they'll roll over. And this is a matter of right and wrong for us, and we're going to stand. As I shared, there are other cases in the nation that are moving forward. We have a case right now that if our case is ruled against us, it will have to go to the Supreme Court, because we have another district, the 5th Circuit, who has ruled in favor of government speak.
In a Texas case.
So in the Texas case, so we're hopeful.
Excellent. Well, Dan, thank you for coming. Jeff, thank you for coming on Truth and Liberty. It's been great having you.
Thank you very much.
And folks, I just want to remind you about our product giveaway. You can get a copy of my booklet called Faith for America just by going to our website at truthandlibertygtn.com and pick up one of these today at no cost. I think you'll be encouraged and hopefully inspired by it. And also be sure to tune in next time here on Truth and Liberty. Our mission here is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. How many of you know today that we need this? We need to do it. We've got to stand up against this radical, secularist, and immoral philosophies coming at us from every direction today. So tune in next time, get equipped, be encouraged. God bless you, and thanks for watching.